Wellington, Massachusetts. If you're surprised that I'm on the call as your host instead of Heather, if you've attended these before, it's because we have this little thing called the NEMA conference coming up next week. And so at this point, all of the staff is busy getting everything prepared for that. And I am the most flexible one of the bunch right now, so I'm very grateful to be your host today. If you have ever been on one of these calls before, you will know Heather actually stating to you up top a little bit of the landscape of the Click Meeting package here, and she always calls your attention to the chat box, which is today in the lower right-hand corner of your screen. We use that chat box to interact with our speakers. That's where you're going to ask your questions and offer your comments and feedback and all of that good stuff. So to do a little bit of a mic check right now and to make sure that that chat box is working, I encourage you all to go to the chat box and say hello and just tell us where you're saying hello from. It's always fun to see where people are coming from. So say hi and tell us where you're typing in. Cool. Ecotarium. Hi, Carrie. John from Portland, reading. Denise from Museum LA. Wow. All right. So my mic is working, and that's always a good first start. Okay. So we're going to get started here, and I have to tell you that I am very excited that Heather allowed me to do this webinar today for two major reasons. The first thing is that branding is something that's very near and dear to my heart. A lot of folks maybe know this, but a lot of folks don't know this, and that is that prior to joining NEMA, and I was a museum director for about 7 years, but prior to that, for about 20 years, I actually had my own marketing communications firm, and I did a lot of branding for a wide variety of different types of industries, including the museum field, but also like one of my claims to fame is I helped brand a line of pants, and I helped brand some beer and that kind of thing. Anyway, so branding is something that is very important to me as part of my history. Second reason that I'm very, very excited to be here today is I am a part of the official Emily Robertson fan club. And I'm part of that fan club for a couple of things. I first met Emily when she was a museum professional at the Boston Museum of Science, part of their traveling exhibitions team, and she did some really, really cool things with a number of different exhibitions, I thought. And then I kind of followed her career as she went to get her MBA, and that's a little bit different twist in our field. And I thought that was really interesting because it offers her a very, very unique perspective on the museum work that we do, and continues to. And then the third reason I'm part of the Emily Robertson fan club is that she is very interestingly a voiceover talent. And if you perhaps watch cartoons, television commercials, or if you watch videos or those types of things, you will often hear a voiceover talent doing their thing, and Emily does that as part of her side gigs. And you might recognize her voice if you have ever listened to one of the Museum People podcasts that NEMA produced a few years ago. She is in fact the person that says, "Welcome to Museum People." So that's Emily Robertson. Anyway, I'm very grateful that Emily's with us today to talk about museum branding. And with that, Emily, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Dan, for that great introduction. I'm very flattered entirely. I want to make sure everybody can hear me. Can give me a shout in the chat window. Just a quick mic check, as they say. Wonderful. Thank you so much, folks. I always love when I attend NEMA lunches with NEMA, watching the chat window to see where everybody's chiming in from. It makes me feel like I'm in a big world of museum folks, which is wonderful. So thank you so much for being part of this session today. The title of my talk is Museum Branding Starts with Your Visitors. So we're going to talk about branding from maybe perhaps a little bit of a different perspective than you might have thought about it before. Let me advance through the slides. Here it is. Yes, there we go. Let me just cover, first of all, let me just say good morning actually good afternoon, everybody from the East Coast time zone. I think we have at least one person calling in from Los Angeles this morning, so good morning to you and anyone else who's chiming in today. I just want to cover a little bit of today's agenda before we get going. This is a 5-part talk. We're going to start with the really basics of brands. Who owns your brand is kind of an interesting question, and we'll get to that. Part 2 being we're going to focus on their hearts and minds. And when I say their, I mean visitors and donors. Part 3, I'm going to talk about a case study of a particular consulting project that I've been on with Gore Place, which is in Eastern Massachusetts, their rebranding story. Part 4 will cover 5 essential takeaways from this talk, so 5 things that you can start doing right away. And then part 5 will be question and answer. I want to say a little bit more about questions and answers. If you have a question during the talk, please put it into the chat window. If I see it, I'll answer it. If I'm talking and I miss it, Dan will interrupt me and bring up the question. I'm happy to take your questions during the talk, so please, you don't have to hold until the end. I also wanted to find out if anybody here is perhaps not in the museum field, maybe they're an independent or working for another kind of business. Please give me a shout in the chat window as well. I'm just kind of curious to see if anyone is there from perhaps a museum adjacent field. Today's talk is going to be focused on museums, in particular small to mid-sized museums. However, branding is universal across all different kinds of businesses. So today's information can be used by all different kinds of businesses. Although for example, I'm going to use the word customer a lot. And when I say the word customer, you can think that I might be meaning stakeholder or donor or visitor, but I might use the word customer as kind of overarching umbrella term to describe all of those terms together, depending on what type of organization you're coming from. All right. Wonderful. Seeing some independents, folks from the NEMA office. Wonderful. Yeah, awesome, great. Thank you so much. All right. So Dan did give me a great introduction. I want to say a little bit more about myself. Hello, I'm Emily Robertson. I'm an independent consultant. I work with a lot of museums as well as other types of social businesses. My mission is to give voice to great ideas that create a world where people feel capable and essential. My consulting areas are in marketing and fundraising primarily, and I'm starting to move into operations work as well. I'm also very interested in accessibility, in particular making things more inclusive for people with disabilities. So if you're into that, please give me a shout as well. Dan did mention my voiceover work. I've been recording voiceover for all different kinds of applications since 2002, mainly in the museum field. I record for things like exhibitions, audio tours, public service announcements, other kinds of program experiences, online training videos, and as Dan mentioned, I did do the intro and outro for the Museum People podcast, which was a really fun project to record. I wanted to talk a little bit more to give you kind of an intro to my background in marketing and particular branding. So my interest in branding began in a galaxy far, far away. When I worked at the Museum of Science in Boston, I was on the project team that produced an exhibition with Lucasfilm about the Star Wars film universe called Star Wars Where Science Meets Imagination. And as part of that project, I was on the traveling exhibitions team that traveled that exhibit all over the world. And I primarily focused on new business development and marketing for our client venue. So any venue that was going to host the exhibit in their host city. I helped them prepare for that exhibition coming to their city and helping them to actually promote it to their visitors in their own city. And I got to know a lot about the Star Wars brand. Not necessarily all the characters and all the movies, although I do know a lot about that, but I got to see it from kind of the business perspective. And the thing about the Star Wars brand one reason it makes it so successful is not only the stories and the characters, but it's actually Lucasfilm's approach to working with their fans. And so that gets back to the fact that branding starts with your customers. In this particular case, museum branding starts with your visitors and donors. And so focusing on the fact that Lucasfilm would focus on its fans really helped them to make that brand such an incredible worldwide success. And certainly that was quite an embarrassment of riches, I think, to get going to learn about branding, to really cut my teeth on branding with Star Wars. After I left the Museum of Science, I went back to school to get an MBA at Babson College in Wellesley, Massachusetts. And at Babson, I focused on data analytics. And I also studied marketing, as all MBA students do. And I learned about something called the marketing mix. And I want to talk about the marketing mix as really a foundation to my understanding of branding. So the marketing mix is a fancy term. It's been around for many decades. I did not invent it. It's kind of tried and true traditional marketing. The marketing mix are 4 factors that companies can, almost like levers they can push to influence a customer's decision about buying their product or service. So the marketing mix is 4 Ps traditionally. The 4 Ps are product, price, place, and promotion. Sometimes people add a 5th P, which is people. I don't add that 5th P because I think people is included in all of the other 4 Ps. And so it's really embedded there. And the reason I wanted to bring this up is because we're going to talk a little bit about how we can actually push and pull these levers, these 4 Ps, to actually influence how customers think about your brand. All right, so that's by way of an introduction. Let's get right into. So that first question I start out with, kind of a funny one. You might be thinking it's a trick question, but we'll see. Part 1, who owns your brand? So let's get to basics. What is a brand? And when I say your brand, what I'm meaning here is your organization's brand, but you could mean your personal brand. It's really a universal topic. But the talk today is really going to be focused on organizational brands. So your brand, your museum's brand, or your company's brand, it's really the sum or the collection of the experiences of your customers, your visitors and donors. It's their use of your products and services. It's their interactions with your staff, board, and volunteers, and perhaps with other visitors. It's their memories, their emotions, and their perceptions of your brand. It also concerns people that don't buy your product or service. Maybe they know about it through word of mouth, through a friend, and they have an opinion about it, even if they've never been to your museum or interacted with your museum at all. It may also include interactions that they have, like I mentioned, with other visitors when they come to your museum. If they go on a tour with people who are strangers to them, those people's interactions are going to influence what they think of your brand. So, there we go. So, who owns your brand? So you might be thinking, oh, Emily, this is a trick question. I own my brand, of course. And the answer to this question is your visitors and donors own your museum's brand. This includes, like I said, people who have never visited your museum own your museum's brand. Your museum's brand lives in their hearts and minds. It lives in the hearts and minds of your customers and potential customers. When I first heard this, I thought this was a really pretty radical idea. I did not invent this. This is pretty tried and true marketing strategy. A lot of companies follow this. And you might be thinking, wow, that if I don't own my brand, how can I influence its performance in the marketplace? And it can be a really, really hard thing to do. You also might be saying to me, but I own my logo. I picked, me and my team, we picked the name of our museum. We picked the way that it appears on the website. We decided the design of marketing materials. All of these things are true, and you do own those things. You own the logo, you own the marketing messages, all that, but you don't own the brand because the brand lives in the hearts and minds of your customers. Next slide. Sometimes people confuse the phrases brand with brand identity. So just by way of definition, a brand identity, I think of it as divided into 2 halves. One half is the visual elements of your brand, so things like your logos, your colors and fonts, perhaps the photos and videos that appear on your website or social media channels. And then the other half is the content elements of your brand. So the language, the writing and text you use, the tone of that writing, and also the messages that writing is based upon. So the visual and the content elements make up your brand identity. You do own the brand identity and you control that, but you don't necessarily control or can easily control the actual brand in the hearts and minds of your customers. All right. So to way to illustrate this, I'd like you all to think about a brand that you love. So think about, why do you love this brand? It could be anything at all. It doesn't have to be a museum. It could be something outside the museum field. Think about the product or service that you buy from them. Maybe it's you love it because it's really easy to buy that product or service. The availability of it, you can reach it really easily. Maybe it's the price that you like versus a competitor. Maybe you have great memories of using this brand when you were a kid, and so you just always used it and always purchased it. Maybe you had a great customer service experience with this brand. And so that's why you love it. My example that for a brand that I love, and this is absolutely unsolicited feedback for this brand, it's called YNAB, YNAB, or You Need a Budget. Give me a shout in the chat window if you are also a YNABber. We tend to go in packs, it seems like. You Need a Budget is an online budgeting software, and it allows people to get better at spending their money, either personal finances or business finances. Allows you to pay down debt. You can use it to do things like pay for a new car with cash, and do other types of financial planning. I absolutely love it because it's helped me to get better at my personal finances. It's taken away a lot of stress for me. It's easy to get to. It's all online. I like the price, and they have really incredible customer service. So anyway, everybody check out YNAB. So on the other half of that coin, perhaps, the other side is thinking of a brand that you hate. So keep this brand that you hate in your own head. We don't have to put it into the chat window. But maybe it's from a particular industry, and maybe you have a bad experience buying it or using it. Think about why you hate this brand. Maybe you had bad customer service. Maybe the price went up and you didn't think the price was worth the value of it. I'm going to use a fake company as an example, Robertson Widgets. I bought a Robertson widget. I thought it was too much money, but it was the only one available to me in the location where I bought it. It arrived 2 days later, and then when I had to try to call to get customer service, they had a very convoluted phone tree, and I was passed from representative to representative. And finally, after 45 minutes, they hung up on me. And so this is why these are all the things that help me to really hate Robertson Widgets. Now, Robertson Widgets might think that they own their own brand, but they don't. It actually lives in my heart and mind because I'm one of their customers. I'm using their brand, and I've had really negative experiences with them. So Robertson Widgets may put out fancy advertising campaigns or other things about that might help them to try to influence what I think about them. But at the end of the day, I've had really negative experiences, and so that brand is always going to be in my mind as a really negative thing. So, turning the page, this leads us to really need to focus on the hearts and minds of our customers and try to get inside them, which you may be saying to me, hey, Emily, that's a really hard thing to do. And it definitely is. People spend their whole careers trying to do that. And I think there are some ways that we can do it even just a little bit that will actually help us to improve the performance of our museums and companies. So the first thing that I like to do when thinking about getting into the hearts and minds of my customers is getting obsessed with what people think about whatever it is that I'm selling. So I would recommend everybody to get obsessed with what people think about your museum. And what I mean by get obsessed with is that try to find out what people think about your museum. Try to get into their minds in a non-creepy way, right? There are many ways that we can do this. Some of the most obvious ones would be things like online and in-person surveys. I think many of you are probably doing that. If you're not already, that's okay. There are a lot of easy ways to start. I imagine for small to mid-sized museums, you probably don't have an in-house evaluation team. You may not even have an out-of-house evaluation consultant helping you out. That's okay. I've known a lot of small to mid-sized museums that will do things like just keep track of attendance at their front desk. They might record things like zip codes, how many people were in the group, what time of day they came, and how they found out about the museum and what caused them to visit. Those are some of the kind of really basic things that you can study and gather and then look at trends over time. You can get more in-depth with something like a focus group. That might include bringing in a consultant to help with that. However, it's certainly not outside the realm of possibility. And this allows you to actually ask more in-depth questions with particular visitors that you want to interview. They can be done over the phone or in person. Then we also might look at some things that we might sometimes forget, things like phone calls and emails. So when your customers call you at your museum or email you about something, keep track of what it is that they're asking. If they're complaining about something, if they're giving you some wonderful feedback that they had a great experience, you can keep track of that and use that as information to understand what's going on in their minds when they think about your museum. We might look at social media comments and DMs or direct messages. A lot of those these days. We might look at press coverage, what the media is saying about our museums. And then finally, I added in gossip. I mean, there may be just kind of anecdotal chatter that's out there about your museums that you might hear about through the grapevine, perhaps through community and governmental resources. You might hear about things at meetings and different gatherings of people that they're saying. And it could be positive feedback, but it also might be negative feedback. Personally, I'm really interested in negative feedback. I want to hear what people don't like, much, much more than what they do like. Because what people don't like, those are the problems that I want to solve. Because if somebody's giving you feedback that's not positive, it's interesting that they've taken the time to giving you that feedback. It's important to listen to them because it's very likely that there are other people that don't want to take the time to give you that feedback, and they're staying and hiding, but they also didn't have a good experience. And these things can be as simple as, the traffic. If there was traffic to get to my museum, when I went to the museum, I didn't have a good experience in an exhibit, or with a staff person, or I didn't know where to go, or I thought the price was too high. It could be all sorts of things. Now, it doesn't mean that we're necessarily going to act on every single piece of information that we get, but we're just going to simply salt it away in our brains and begin to collect it and look at trends of it. And I'll talk a little bit more about that process when we talk about the case study with place. All right. And if you think of other ways that we can really get to know our visitors and what they're thinking besides this list, I'd love to hear about them. All right. The other half of this coin is really thinking about, once we have begun to study our visitors and try to understand them, is actually giving them what they want. And sometimes what museums are offering is not necessarily what their target audiences actually want to buy. And trying to kind of mesh these things together can be really, really hard. Yes, I'm getting some feedback that thank you for the feedback. Are people having trouble hearing me? Give me a shout if you're having trouble hearing me. Yep. I'm going to pause for a moment and just make sure that we're all together. Okay. Yes, thank you, Michelle, for that feedback. I'm sorry. I don't know technically what can be done. I am talking into my computer audio. If you have computer audio, that might be better. But I'm sorry, I don't know. Dan, maybe you know a little bit more technical troubleshooting.
You're barking up the wrong tree with technology here. So
I'm sorry. Yes. Okay.
Sound fine to me, though.
Okay, thank you. If that persists, please let me know. So we have many things that museums offer to visitors and donors: programs, exhibitions, outreach, all of your offerings. If these don't match what your visitors want, you need to just change your offerings so your museum can perform better in the marketplace. And again, with our case study, we'll talk a little bit more about how Workplace did that. So I want to pause for a moment before continuing on and talk about the phrase rebranding and the way that I think about it, because here we're really talking about kind of generally museum branding. So what is rebranding? And I think that term is kind of thrown around a lot, and maybe it kind of has sort of a vague definition of different kinds, depending where you're talking about it. When I think about rebranding, it can be as simple as a brand update, perhaps a brand identity update. Maybe it's a new logo. Maybe it's some new marketing materials with new marketing messages that have been refreshed. It could be anything from that very simple to something very kind of a full-blown, complete gut renovation of your brand with brand new logo. It could be a new company name, an entirely new location. You could be building new buildings, et cetera, et cetera. I think of it all together. I had a colleague once say to me that museums can't rebrand unless they change their name. If they haven't changed their name, they didn't rebrand. And I thought that was really interesting comment, because I don't think of rebranding that way. I think of it really as a spectrum of updates and changes to how you want to influence your customers' perceptions of you in the marketplace. So you don't have to do something as drastic as changing your name to do a rebrand. In fact, for-profit companies rebrand all the time, pretty much constantly, and customers may not be directly aware of it. Maybe as subtle as a logo tweak to a new product in the marketplace or things like that. I also want to mention a little bit about some pitfalls and where some things can go wrong. And in case these things come up, sometimes colleagues will ask me about, well, I want to change my museum's name. I think that that's going to make us perform better in the marketplace where we want to be, help us to reach the target audiences we want to reach. They might say to me, I want to build a new building. I think a brand new building is really going to bring the people up that we want to reach. Or they might say, well, we want to just completely gut all of our programs and rebuild them from the ground up. And all of these things may result in the goals that you're trying to reach, but they also might not. And I think in general, museums might get into a difficult area if they haven't done their homework about who their visitors and donors are and what they want prior to making all of these great changes. So I think if any of you are thinking about a renaming or a really huge rebranding, you want to make sure that you've done your homework, and that can be a lot of work and it can be a lot of pain in the beginning, but it's going to save you a lot of pain in the end by helping you to make better choices. So it's not that you shouldn't rename.
So Emily, I've got an observation on that. I've heard a lot lately about historical societies renaming themselves history centers,
Yeah.
and a lot of artists associations have become art museums. You know, sort of rebranding. There's a
Right.
lot of or you know, certain places become historic something or other as opposed to the such and such historical society, and that seems to be a a trend. We've actually had some NEMA sessions on it, I think, as
Yeah,
well. But that's an example, right?
definitely. That's a really good example of maybe not changing the entire name, but slightly changing it. I've heard of museums and art centers doing that because they want to reach different types of government and foundation donors and grants. They want to position themselves in a different type of marketplace. Maybe they want to reach different audiences than they've reached before. And I think the ones that are very successful at making that such a big drastic change are the ones that have really done their homework before they make that change, because those changes can be expensive. And what I'm trying to advise you on is think you can do all of this type of work at really little to no cost before any of the rest of that work happens. Yeah. So thank you for that. All right, but I can definitely take other questions about renaming if you have them. So let's get into this rebranding story about Gore Place. So I'm an independent consultant, which I mentioned, and I've been on a long-term engagement with Gore Place since 2016 when they decided to update their brand, really go through a rebranding. Let's learn a little bit about Gore Place. I'd like everybody to take a moment and just breathe and just look at this beautiful photograph. Every time I see this photo, my blood pressure lowers, which is wonderful. This is an aerial photograph taken last fall of Gore Place's estate. Gore Place is a private 501c3 nonprofit museum and farm. It's located on the Waltham-Watertown line in eastern Massachusetts. You can see the beautiful Boston skyline there in the distance along the skyline on the right of the photograph. What I love about this photograph is that it really depicts one of the key differentiators of Gore Place is its open space. Gore Place owns 50 acres of open land. This estate is owned by the Gore Place Society. Gore Place Society was formed in 1935 after a group of Bostonians got together and saved this piece of property from being sold and turned into a housing development. And it's been operating as a nonprofit since then. It interprets the history of Christopher and Rebecca Gore, who owned this property and actually many more acres than what is remaining today. He was a governor and U.S. Senator of Massachusetts in the early 19th century, and they lived on this property and built their home, which is this mansion. I'll show you a close-up of it, an aerial close-up. This is their 1806 mansion. There are also two other historical buildings on the property. When I say we, I think of it as we because I think I'm part of the team there. And I know some of them are on the webinar today, so I'm thankful as well. Hopefully I'll get it all right today. So this property, we offer year-round programming in a lot of different topics, not just history subjects, but recreation. We also farm sheep and chickens, and you can actually see them. I'm going to move my cursor, and I'm circling them right there. You can see them in the aerial photograph, and I'll show you a close-up from the ground a little bit later. Gore Place has about 15 full-time staff members. Yep. Yes, thank you. Gore Place. Yes, Waltham, Massachusetts. Yeah. So it has about 15 full and part-time staff members, and really has just incredible output all year. The mansion is fully furnished. They do a lot of restoration and preservation projects and archaeological projects on the ground and within historical buildings. These are a couple of photographs of the interior of the house. This is the great staircase. There's Chris and Rebecca there on the right. Here's the great hall. They had some really incredible parties in this room. So we'll take a moment on that. These are their flock of about 25 Leicester long-wool sheep, which is a heritage breed. They're one of the few organizations or farms that breed these sheep in the United States. It's a rare breed. And they're called Leicester long-wools because They grow a really beautiful long staple of wool that makes excellent waterproof and weatherproof products. They're also most famous, we'll say, around the area for its Shearing Festival, which has been running consecutively every year in April on the last Saturday in April since 1987. So if you're doing the math, this year they celebrated their 32nd sheep shearing festival. It takes up nearly the entire property. This is from 2 years ago. You can kind of see this is looking west along the property, so the opposite direction than we were looking before. And on a beautiful sunny day, they will welcome upwards of 10,000 visitors. So for all of us museum staff, you can imagine a staff of 15 managing a big event with 10,000 people is an incredible feat that they're been able to put on, that they are rightfully very, very proud of. And it seems to just keep on going, which is wonderful. So why are we talking about a rebranding story for Gore Place? So Gore Place had been in the past, prior to the brand update, wanting to meet some new goals. One of the main reasons was that Gore Place is really a hidden gem. Not that many people have heard of it or have visited it. Today they get about 60,000 visitors in person a year, about 100,000 online. But there was still kind of a dampening in the marketplace about brand perception, about people even very close to them who've never visited Gore Place and are really not that familiar with it. There also was a lot of brand confusion with other organizations. Sometimes people think that Gore Place is owned by other organizations, or is perhaps owned by the city of Waltham or the city of Watertown. And these are not remarkable things that visitors might think. But there was just a lot of brand confusion that really needed to be cleaned up. There was also a desire by the organization to increase attendance and in particular earned and contributed revenue. This organization has about an operating budget that's about $1 million. So that does not include large capital projects that they're able to undertake. But in order to really make this organization what it is, they really needed more bucks. We can all relate to that, right? So the plan was to try to use marketing to get up above the noise. You know what that means in the marketplace, getting up above all the chatter about all the other offerings that are out there that visitors can take advantage of. They examined the Cultural Data Project for Data Arts, which they put data into every year. And they looked at peer organizations and found that their peers close to them were spending upwards of 10% of their budget on marketing. And Gore Place was in the single digits with its marketing spend. And so this really made sense in terms of, well, why haven't more people heard of Gore Place? And it could be just that we just really need to spend more money on marketing. And that really means more paid advertising. So the board decided to form a board-related marketing committee in 2015 to 2016. The committee hired 2 consultants from Executive Service Board, now rebranded to ESC, to lead them in a 10-month project to create a 3-year marketing plan. And I was part of this team. We went through an analysis of financial information about the organization. We looked at industry trends. We also looked at competitors. We did a competitive analysis. And this involved talking about who are Gore Place's competitors. And it's a little bit hard to find exact one-to-one competitors, but we're able to look at them across kind of a spectrum of competitors. So we looked at other museums. We looked at farms. We looked at really other places where people might be spending their leisure dollars, movie theaters, amusement parks, things like that. We looked all over the United States, although really focused primarily in the Northeast. We visited. We may have visited some of you, in fact, went out and put on our visitor hats and pretended to be visitors and experienced what it's like to be a visitor at some of our competitive places. We also looked at them from afar. We also analyzed our target audiences. So we looked at that by studying the program mix that we currently were offering and then what we knew about who was coming. And so Gore Place had already been tracking things like visitor attendance, group size, zip codes, and we began to collect actually more data and new forms of data that way, mainly through surveys. And this was very, very low cost. We did pen and paper surveys and then had them typed up into Excel. Since then, we've also done some online surveying, so that data is collected together in the online tool. We decided actually to change our target audiences and refine them into 3 categories. And then we wrote value proposition statements, which is a marketing tool that's used to describe what Workplace is offering in the marketplace. And then from there wrote key messages. So that value proposition statement is used to talk about us internally. And then the key messages are used to talk about us externally. And then the key messages eventually went into externally facing marketing materials. And this was really something that had never been done before in such a formal way with the organization. And it was great to kind of assemble this team to actually embark on this. The team, I should say, was made up of board members, staff members, volunteers, and friends of Workplace. And then we brought in the visitor voice by using survey tools and also analyzing that list of other things I mentioned earlier, studying phone calls and emails, social media messages, online review sites, things like that, to really understand what visitors were thinking about the brand. So we decided after all of this, the plan was written, and the very first initiative was to really refresh the brand, really update it and go through that rebranding. So that included an update to the visual identity and the content identity, so the content messages and those visual elements. This was the previous logo that we had been using prior to 2016. We also have been using this tagline at the bottom, the historic Governor Gore Estate. It's a fine tagline. It's a fine logo. It's a little bit limiting for a number of reasons. It doesn't reproduce as well as we might want it to on all different types of materials. And also the tagline is very specific to naming Governor Gore and kind of leaves out a lot of other things that we might want to talk about. The farm, our influence from Rebecca Gore, Robert Roberts, who was the Gore's butler, and a number of other stories that we wanted to tell. We also, it was dedicated on really just 2 colors, kind of this, it was almost like a rusty orange that matched the brick of the house, or black with white details. And so not a super flexible logo identity, and so we really decided to go and embark on making a new one. So this is from a little logo progression made by our graphic design team at Colorbox Industries. I'd like to give them a shout. We've been working with them since then. They do a majority of our marketing materials, and they did help us to produce our new logo. This took about 3 months of a lot of team meetings. There were actually 5 different types of kind of logo directions we went in, and we ended up narrowing it down from left to right to the final one on the right. And this is the final logo, much bigger, so you can see it more easily. We also developed this tagline. That was an iterative process as well. And this tagline and logo has been used very consistently across all of our materials. I would say, as a little fun little aside about producing this, this was a relatively straightforward and easy logo to get to, with the exception of the sheep in the middle of the house. That sheep was very, very vexing to all of us. We worked with our graphic designer at Colorbox Industries to make 25 iterations of that sheep, with a different snout, a different head shape, different ankle size, different, body. I mean, it was like, I should make a flip book of all the sheep. I mean, I thought I was not going to survive this, because those sheep would be living in my nightmares. But we did finally come up with the correct sheep, and it was really important to get it right, so it was worth the time. This logo has a number of different versions depending on where we need to use it. We have one where the Gore and place are stacked below the house. We have it with the tagline, without the tagline. We have an all black version. We can do it knocked out to white. I mean, a lot of flexibility, which we didn't have before. All right, so shout out to Colorbox there. We also worked on just updating messages, content messages, and hired a content writer to work with us on that. Found somebody externally who could work as a freelancer and help us to really make our writing really sing about what we wanted people to know about Workplace in the marketplace. We also hired a professional photographer. I want to give a shout to Eric Workman. He's our professional photographer. He took this photo and all the other photos that you've seen from Workplace, with the exception of the aerial ones. This is the Shearing Festival, and what we really wanted to show in these new photos, not only updated photographs, but photographs with people, because that was a big part of the new brand identity, was showing people really enjoying Workplace. Here's some more people. This is a corn roast. very popular summer corn roasts. I can segue into moving and talking about how we updated our program mix. I talked about that marketing mix at the beginning of the session today, hearing about kind of pushing and pulling those levers of the 4 Ps of marketing. And one of the big ones is, what are you selling? So those products and services. We looked at actually retiring some programs that weren't performing as well. Maybe they were declining. Every product and service has a life cycle, and it goes from, birth to decline. And it's very uncommon to find a product that has survived for many, many decades. They all need to either get refreshed or retired. And Corn Roast was a new program and one that we've actually expanded on, so it ended up being really, really popular. Here's some more photos of adorable families at our Top Time program that we've also expanded because we learned from our visitors that they're really loving our family programs. So we've started to do more of them. In terms of marketing materials, we've updated and refreshed a lot of materials. This is an illustrated map of the property that we didn't have before we made new. This is actually a kiosk, an outdoor kiosk sign. And you can see it's actually quite large. It's not as big on the screen, but if you're there in person, you can see on the bottom of it, there's a number of professional photographs that showcase kind of pieces of the experience at Gore Place. So visitors who are here, say close to the end of the day when there aren't staff, they still get a little taste of it. I should say, I didn't mention before, Gore Place, another key differentiator is that its grounds, its 50 acres of grounds, are open to the public for free, 364 days a year from dawn to dusk. And it's one of the things that they offer that really helps the community. And we've been working on actually advertising that and making sure that people know that they can come visit us for free and do a lot of different things without paying. In terms of branding for this is actually a new program that we began to run. This is the PopUp Holiday Shop. It runs in the late fall every year. This was a sign that I made. And this is my plug for hiring people who have a lot of talents in graphic design. I know that it can get expensive, but I believe if you can try to afford it, even do a few of them professionally designed, it can really make a big difference. So I made this one. This is a no frills sign. I mean, honestly, I have candy cane clip art here. Like this could be, you know what I mean? Like I am putting my own graphic design skills down. We decided to hand this one over. The next year we did it to Colorbox Industries and they made this version. And look, it looks, here we are. You can really tell between the two that we're using these marketing materials to influence what our visitors think about our brand, their perception of it. This might look like, hey, a more fun event. It looks unique. It has information about it being a pop-up shop and a preview shopping party. And this actually is an outdoor banner, quite a large outdoor vinyl banner that people see as they drive by. Once we did this, and we did this type of banner creation for a lot of our other programs running using outdoor banners, they've done super well in terms of helping people to get that awareness of what we're offering. Another area that we adjusted was outdoor signage. You can see this is the front of the accessory building of the 1793 carriage house. The black plastic marquee sign on the bottom left was kind of the old version. The sign, I actually like it a lot. It certainly got the job done. It helps visitors to know where they can meet a mansion tour. They start here in this building on this day. Sometimes they start elsewhere, and that helps visitors to get to where they want to go. The feedback from a lot of our board and staff was that, well, it's not the prettiest. Maybe there's something better we can do. And so I worked with a number of our staff members and with Colorbox Industries to design a sign post. You can see there on the right with a white sign that has very basic, simple text, and it's actually a changeable sign. And so we can give different messages in that. It matches the building. It looks professional. It looks very welcoming, and it's done really well for us. And that was not that expensive to do in terms if you have to do outdoor signs. All in, we've spent about $1,000 on that sign, and we're going to get a lot of mileage and a lot of life out of it. So in terms of results of all of this branding, I mean, has this really worked for Gore Place? And it's worked in a lot of ways. They were able to increase after the first summer after their rebranding, they increased their daily tour visitation by 30%. Those numbers are just like absolutely out of sight. We were all really, really surprised and delighted by that number. That number's fluctuated a little bit, but it's back up now. We've also been able to increase contributed revenue and really attract a lot of new donors and also returning donors by producing new marketing materials and really deliberately putting out those marketing messages and that marketing look and feel that we want with online annual reports, mailed annual reports, and all sorts of different things. I don't have any of those on this presentation, but I'm happy to share those documents with you if you want to see what we ended up doing. And I'm happy to talk about the details for those as well. And so in terms of, remember I said at the beginning of the GorePlace rebranding story, I mentioned the Cultural Data Project and how they were trying to compete with peers that were spending 10% or around 10% of their total budget on marketing. GorePlace's board has been so pleased with the results of this rebrand and all of the efforts of staff and volunteers is that they've actually been continuing to raise that amount each year. And so we're slowly approaching over time that 10% milestone level, which I think is really, really excellent. And that's really a testament to the great effort of the staff that have really put this on.
Okay, Emily, we have a related question here. Did you communicate the rebranding with the public, and if yes, how?
Yes, we actually did. That's a great question, from Meg. We did communicate the rebranding with the public. We were a little bit, maybe we were a little bit coy about it. I think we wanted to be we actually did what I consider kind of a soft rollout. The reason for that is that if we had all the money in the world, we would have rolled out everything all at once. So we would have refreshed all of the marketing materials and everything, the website, everything, all on the same day. That would have been ideal. And that's what big for-profit companies do. GorePlace didn't have that kind of cash. So we actually had to spread out that rollout over the course of that fiscal year. This was fiscal year 17. So 2016 into 2017. And so when we finalized our logo, we rolled it out first on our social media pages. We also did a very quick refresh of our website with our in-house website manager and social media manager, Aaron. And then we hired a website design firm to actually do a major refresh on the site, and that's the site that you currently see. We also rolled out, we updated things like printed materials. I remember the stationery, we stopped using the old stationery when the new logo went up onto our website. So we could begin to be consistent about that type of thing. And then anything new that came up, our annual report was brand new. We updated our biannual newsletter, which is printed and now available online. That had the new logo. The outdoor signs, which are much more expensive to do, we ended up refreshing those over the course of that year. So there was a period of time where the outdoor street sign, if you're out on Main Street, Waltham, you would have seen the old logo for a good 6 months. And that might make some marketers totally freak out. But that was those were the breaks. Like we didn't have the cash to invest in replacing that outdoor sign. And you know what? Nothing bad happened. It was totally fine. And I think if you want to do that, I'd say go ahead. All right. Are there other questions?
Yeah, we have one from Dawn. Hi, Dawn. How did you decide on the 3 audience categories, and did three categories encompass all types of visitors, or was this just a target audience?
That's a good question. So about the audience categories. So the categories before the rebranding had not been very well specified in terms of really identifying the profile of those audiences. So if you think about that kind of marketing profile, who are in those categories, what are their age ranges, where do they live, what is their income levels, what types of programs do they come to, and what do they want to come to, things like that. We began to study that through that analysis of all of the data we looked at about GorePlace, and determined that there ended up being 3 groups. One of them was a group of adults who may or may not have older children or children at home. They may have no children. Maybe they're 45 years old and up, and they're coming to certain types of programs, and they live in these zip codes, and et cetera, et cetera. The second category was kind of a subgroup of them, but really, really on their own as well. It was families with small children, and the small children tended to be elementary age or younger. And these were families who might be, say, they're 50 and younger, and they have children living at home, and they're coming to certain types of programs that we were offering, and they're living in these zip codes, et cetera, et cetera. And then the third group were donors, and we didn't divide up the donors, although you probably could continue to further subdivide donors. Since then, we've actually brought back our ESB consultants in for another round of changes to our now new marketing plan, because it's been enough time where we actually went through that entire plan, and now we have a new 3-year plan. And we went through the process again. We didn't take as many as 10 months. This time we took about 4 months. But we did another big analysis and continued to refine those target audiences. And we've actually refined them even further by analyzing what we now know over the past 3 years about who these people are. So it's sort of this constant, it's an iterative process. You're never really done. You're constantly gathering information about people and changing your approach to reaching what they want. Yeah. Any other questions there? I'm going to move on to 5 essential takeaways. There's nothing there. Oh, Meg, thank you. I might say also on your question about how we communicated the rebranding. We didn't do a big splashy, like I originally wanted to do like a birthday, like a logo cutting cake and invite the public and all this stuff. We ended up not doing that, I think, mostly because we were just really tired at that point. But we did roll it out to the membership at the annual meeting that fall, right when it got approved. So I printed the logo at Staples. I put it on a little piece of foam core, and put it on an easel, and we rolled it out there. So we got some oohs and ahs, and that was very gratifying. And then when we put it on our social media channels, our social media manager mentioned, "Hey, we have a new logo." So it was really kind of a soft thing, and I think that's fine to do. All right. So we're almost to the hour. I want to leave you with 5 takeaways that I've learned really over the process of helping Gore Place rebrand, and some things that I've talked about along the way. So really remembering, the very first one is remembering that your customers own your brand. You don't own your brand. And so it's your job to get into their hearts and minds and figure out what they want. And we do that by being obsessed with what your customers want, and just really trying to deliver on what they want and giving them what they want. There's often a mismatch between these two things. I mean, with museums and with any organization, there's a lot of different priorities, and sometimes these things can compete. But if we try to think about who we're trying to serve, that can really help us get to the finish line. The fourth one I would say is hire talented people to help you. I would say don't go it alone, particularly if you're a small or mid-sized organization. Maybe you have an all-volunteer staff. Maybe you have just one paid staff member and everybody else is volunteer. Try to find people who've done this before to help you out. It can be as simple as just having a conversation with them. It doesn't have to be as in-depth as hiring consultants to run a 10-month marketing plan development, although if you can afford that, I think it's something to look at. Maybe there's grant opportunities to help pay for some of these things. I think that Gore Place has really proven that the investment is really worth it. Really investing the money, you're going to see that return if you invest in these things and really do your homework and do it right. The last takeaway that I would leave you is just being ready and willing to take smart risks. Refresh that logo. If you say, hey, my logo is looking really, really blah, and it's just, I think it might be really fun and really energizing, maybe for the staff also, as well as visitors, to have a new logo. Maybe that's something that you could consider. Maybe a risk you could take is rolling out a new kind of survey and trying to find out what we can understand from visitors. Maybe it's getting out there and talking to visitors if we've never done that before. There's all different levels of risks that we can take, and they don't have to be very expensive. They don't have to cost any money at all. But trying to think about our brands in new ways from the perspective of our visitors is really the key to success here. So those are really all the slides that I have. We're up to part 5. If there's any more Q&A, I'm happy to take those now.
So here we go. Do you have any suggestions for resources that we can share with board members to start conversations about branding?
Yes, excellent question. So yes, it's so key, as we all know, to get our board members on board with making a major change, like trying to influence visitors about our brand and how we can influence them, in particular if we're going to start spending money on marketing that our organization might not have been spending before. That was something Gore Place really grappled with. They really needed to make the case for marketing in the beginning. I think that resource I mentioned before, which is led by Data Arts, which is an organization that collects the data as part of the Cultural Data Project. If you're getting grant money through the MCC or other organizations, you're probably already doing the Cultural Data Project work each year. If you're not, I would highly recommend looking into it. I don't think it costs anything to join it, although I'm not totally sure about that. but look into it. And I'm happy to send those links if anybody needs them. Feel free to reach out to me. That's a really great way of looking at what your peer organizations are doing. And that was a key thing that Gore Place needed in terms of its leadership telling its board, this is where these other organizations that we emulate and we value what they're doing, these peers are doing these things and they're spending 10% of their budget on marketing and we're not. So we need to start to reach for that over time. And that was a key place. I would say there's also a lot of great books out there about branding. I'm happy to provide those if you'd like to email me. You can certainly share this link to this recording with them if they want to hear from me. This recording will be available on NEMA's website in a few days, I believe. Yeah, those are some resources I would say about conversations about branding. Another thing I think that also helped a lot was that with Gore Place's marketing committee, because it had board members on it, they got to see really front and center the data coming from visitors. They got to see the surveys, read the results, and also participate in some of that data collection. And that was really helpful for them to understand at their place the impact that visitors should have on your organization's choices and which direction you're going to go in. So get them involved, get them out, talking to visitors, participating, and seeing on the ground level what visitors are talking about with relation to their organization. Yeah, any other questions?
I've got one for you, Emily.
Great.
This is there's a conundrum always with trying to choose your audiences, your target audiences. And typically we want to reach out and expand our audiences to folks that don't visit us and haven't heard about us and so forth. How do you actually get information about those people? How do you survey people who don't visit you?
Yeah, wow, that is, wow, that's got to be like the holy grail of marketing and branding, right? How do we know what visitors are thinking if they're not visiting us? So that's something I think that I've really struggled to figure out in a lot of ways. I'm not sure that there's really one particular answer. I think it depends on the goal that you're trying to reach. I can give the example with Gore Place. They have a lot of I call them casual visitors. They visit the estate because they can come onto the property for free. They may come for a picnic. Might come on their commute to the bus stop up to Main Street. They walk across the property every morning, but they don't otherwise interact with any staff member or with any program. But they are visiting Gore Place and they have an opinion about it. And so we have done timing and tracking studies of them. And we're interested in actually moving towards actually going out and interviewing them, asking them a few questions about their experiences to try to get at what makes them come to the property and what might draw them into actually coming to a formal program. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Other than that, there's a lot of other online tools that you can use to try to get a sense. I know, social media channels have them where you can get a sense about who's clicking on your events, who's looking, what are their demographics. Knowing them on an individual level, I think, is really hard, and that's really where we're trying to get to people individually. Yeah.
I think I see Betsy here mention Know Your Own Bone, which is Colleen Dillenschneider. Yeah. And there's also Susie Wilkening consultant. She does a lot of analytical work, data work on the field in general. And I think that some of these, slicing and dicing categories of types of visitors that might not be your own. I mean, every historical society wants to have people that are under the age of 40, or whatever involved with them, whatever. But, there are some good demographic things that might not be your particular local audience, but might give you some clues on some of these audiences that are a bit of a mystery to you that you can use to then further get some information about them and what they enjoy and don't enjoy and that type of thing.
I would agree with that also. Yes, thank you, Betsy, for talking about Colleen Dillenschneider's blog, Know Your Own Bone. It's an excellent blog. I subscribe to her weekly blog post. I highly recommend you do that, and it's really easily shareable. So you can send those to board members, and they're very, very digestible, kind of quick reads. And that comes from the Impacts study, which is a nationwide long-term study of all different types of kinds of data about people's usage of cultural attractions and other things. So yes, definitely look at Know Your Own Bone. Thank you also, Dawn. Looks like she linked to an AASLH, some kind of leaflet. I'm assuming that might be a branding, and that's a good place to look. Also, AAM, AASLH, NEMA, they all have white papers and other types of documents that you can look at for further information that you might use to make the case to do this work at your organization. Yeah. Well, you're welcome to reach out to me at this email, emilyrobertsonmba@gmail.com. You can also reach me through my voiceover website, which is emilyrobertsonvoiceover.com. I'm happy to be a sounding board for you if you want to send me a note and meet with me by phone or have some coffee or whatever. Happy to talk about your branding projects. And I wish you all luck. I think that museums, we all know that they offer such wonderful resources to our communities, and it's worth getting up above the noise of competition from other things that visitors might be looking at also to really come to us for those resources that they need in their everyday lives. So thank you and best of luck to everybody.
Emily, thank you so much. As usual, it's very edifying hearing from you and your dulcet tones of your voiceover voice, which is great. And I really do appreciate it, and appreciate everybody else for being online with us today. Thanks for your interest in Lunch with NEMA, and hopefully we will see each and every one of you in 1 week's time up in Burlington, Vermont. And we're going to have a great time there. So thank you again, Emily. Appreciate it. So long, everybody.
Thank you, Dan. Bye, everybody.